Gabriel, sorry to
Yes.
jump in again. Is there any way, are you sharing the presentation, or when you go to share, maybe you could share the entire desktop? That might alleviate the issue. We're still stuck on the slides a bit.
Now, what do you see?
I'm seeing the past slide here, how we got here.
All right. Okay, let me try again. I'm going to stop sharing.
Looking at the Vitalik slide.
And do you see my different, like Firefox now?
It looks a lot better now.
It does?
No, but it seems to be working great now.
Okay, awesome. So this was my, in the beginning was Bitcoin and Bitcoin was good slide. And so my idea here was just that the blockchain allows you to store little bits of metadata onto the blockchain using script, off return, and in other ways. We're hearing a lot of noise. If anybody who's joining can mute their microphone, I appreciate it. And hello to all the, we're not. All right, here we go. So yeah, in the beginning was Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was good. And we all know this. Bitcoin took off. It was blessed from on high. Satoshi was clearly divinely inspired. Scripting language, Bitcoin's scripting language, which is called Script, allows you to write tiny little bits of metadata to the blockchain, and that you could think of these bits of metadata as assets or ways for managing assets. So relatively early on, developers attempted to do this. So you can see at the bottom left here, we have Namecoin. This was the very first altcoin as far as I can dig up. And Satoshi actually created the first proposal for merged mining around Namecoin.
Sorry, looks like you did.
You're good now?
Now try to pull it back up again, sorry.
Sure.
You're back, looks great.
Okay, cool. So, so Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash, and initially it was 80 bytes on the Bitcoin Core testnet, and this is when the counterparty team were developing one of their protocols. And for what reason, I'm not entirely sure, but the Bitcoin Core developers decided to reduce it to 40 bytes on the mainnet. And so I have this blog post here. Again, I can share this with anybody. And as I was rereading this, I don't even think I caught the most interesting part in this screenshot, but there was this blog post called An Open Letter and Plea to the Bitcoin Core Development Team. And basically it's describing how they were creating this token asset layer, a token asset layer called Counterparty, and they were able to encode all of these tokens and management commands to op return whenever it was 80 bytes, but reducing it to 40 bytes basically made that architecture unworkable, and they were going to have to do some hack where they were using multi-sig outputs or something like that. But basically it's interesting to me the way they worded this. You know, they put the word plea in there because they were kind of just putting out there that they felt like they had a very valuable piece of technology They felt like the decision to reduce op return was ultimately going to cause that technology to not be able to go to fruition. So that was one of the things that happened, is the op return was lowered, the amount of data you can store. The second one is just certain opcodes were disabled. So we recently re-enabled opcodes on Bitcoin Cash. That was one of the things we did in our recent hard fork, and that was big news. And some of those opcodes were ones which got disabled very early on. And then a third thing which happened, which I think was one of the most, there are several things in my opinion which have happened to Bitcoin Core which have really steered it in the opposite direction of what I would have preferred had we actually wanted Bitcoin to have worldwide adoption by now. One of them is the scaling debate. We all know that. That's very much a part of our tribe and our story. To me, tokens is the other huge part of that. I really think not having tokens on Bitcoin Core is as big as not scaling. I think as tokens just blow up in Bitcoin Cash, as everything what we're about to talk about over the rest of this talk, as this plays out over the next 2 years in Bitcoin Cash, I think we'll come to realize that tokens not happening on Bitcoin Core is actually as big as a fumble as the scaling debate, because I really think tokens are profoundly important, and they will prove to be. And you see that with my third point here. Vitalik left the Bitcoin Core community, and he went and created Ethereum. So, he wanted to create a token platform on top of Bitcoin Cash. The team, a polite way to say it, was discouraging to that idea. The community of Bitcoin, I'm sorry, not Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Core app. Vitalik wanted to create tokens on Bitcoin Core. The community was discouraging. He left and created Ethereum, and Ethereum has proven to be incredibly innovative and valuable. So basically, we lost one of the greatest computer science minds of our generation completely from the Bitcoin Core camp, and he went and created a whole other tribe, which just has a ton of innovation and a ton of smart people and a ton of money and a ton of creative energy. And we're fortunate that Vitalik is very much open to Bitcoin Cash, and I welcome him into our tribe as much as he's willing to participate. But as I identified, there are sort of 4 things that diverged Bitcoin Core from having tokens. The first is that they just reduced the size of op return from 80 to 40 bytes. They disabled several opcodes. Vitalik, one of the greatest computer science minds of our generation, left to create his own platform. And then emerging protocols like Counterparty started voicing their concern that these decisions were ultimately going to cause their projects to not work as well either. Okay, so where are we now? This is the present. Where are we now? So as you guys know, we had a fork from Bitcoin Core. There's been multiple hard forks now internally, but we think of hard forks as system upgrades. So one of the things that Ethereum does real well is that they have this roadmap. It's very clear. It's set out in multiple phases for the years ahead of us, and they plan hard forks in advance, and they consider hard forks network upgrades. So somewhere along the line in the Bitcoin Core camp, the social convention got set that hard forks were bad, and so a lot of the decisions have been made through soft forks, but hard forks can be thought of as network upgrades. So Bitcoin Cash has a hard fork every 6 months. And some things we've done in our hard forks are we enabled all of the opcodes which were previously turned off. We actually raised our max block size to 32 megabytes instead of the 1 megabyte, which is on Bitcoin Core today. And then we increased the amount of data you can write to op return from 40 bytes to 220 bytes. So we did more than a 5x leap there. And sure enough, just in probably, 2 months or so after our most recent hard fork, we had an absolute explosion of biodiversity around different token protocols. And there are actually 2 that aren't even on here that I want to give a shout out to. I need to update my slides, but so here are 7, plus I know 2 more, that's 9. I'm sure there are others which I don't know about. So real quick, we have Wormhole. So Wormhole is a fork of Omni. It was recently released by Bitmain in Hong Kong on August 1st. I created the first SDK for it called Wormhole SDK, which I'll show you guys after we go through these slides. Like I said, this is based on Omni. Right here you have SLP. This is Simple Ledger Protocol. This was created by Jonah Pukeball of Electron Cash, James Kramer, Unwriter from BitDB, Ryan Charles from yours, SpinBCH from our team at Bitcoin.com. This is similar in nature to Colored Coins. We have Counterparty. So Counterparty actually forked to Counterparty Cash. Their logo is green. I need to update it here, but it's this CP here. We have this CC. This is Colored Coins. This exists now on Bitcoin Cash as well. Ari and the team at Kryptonize.it recently added it to their wallet, Kryptonize.cash. Kyoken, that is the new token platform by Bitprim. I've not actually dug in on this one, so I'm not totally familiar with the details here, but I know they just recently released this. Down here we have the group proposal. So group is pretty amazing. That was put forth by Emil Oldenburg, our CTO at Bitcoin.com, as well as Andrew Stone, one of the chief scientists or one of the main developers at Bitcoin Unlimited. Then we have the Tokeda protocol. This was put forward by Ioannis Vimerol, also another amazingly smart guy and team. And then there are two on here that I don't have on here. So our CTO has been working on a project called Honeybagger, which is a op return based protocol, but it's similar in nature to Group. And then there is the Bitcoin token by Clemens, one of the co-founders of yours, who I think is also an amazingly smart computer scientist and somebody we're very fortunate to have in our tribe. And so those are 9 token proposals which have emerged right after we had our hard forks, re-enabled opcodes, turned on blocks to 32 megabytes, and then increased our op return from 40 bytes to 220 bytes. So I think that's important because it really does show that the blockchain enables you to think of, to create and manage tokens or assets. You can see it because developers immediately try and do it as soon as you put forward the enabling functionality onto the blockchain. So we're starting to sort of see this Tocambrian explosion where we're seeing all of these different types of tokens explored. Some of them are going to make sense, some of them are not, some of them are ultimately going to flourish in their niche. So there are also sort of these ideas which are coming into focus around different types of tokens. So there are what are called utility tokens and what are called security tokens. And basically utility tokens are used within a company's product or service, and security tokens derive their value from an external tradable asset. So it's worth maybe kind of going over those each a little bit. And I listed some of my favorite utility tokens here. These are actually all on Ethereum. None of these are on Bitcoin yet, but it kind of gives a sense of some of the creative stuff which is happening in the Ethereum ecosystem and where we can look for signals on what we can expect to happen next in our ecosystem. So quickly, some of the ones that I think are worth highlighting, and there are a ton more than this. I mean, there are thousands of these, but these are just a few that came to mind. So you can see BAT, B-A-T. That's the basic attention token. So I think this one is very important because, so Brendan Eich, who is the creator of JavaScript and the co-founder of Netscape Navigator and the co-founder of Mozilla and Firefox, he obviously helped create the modern web and some of the modern browsers. So he left his job as CEO of Mozilla and created something called the Brave browser with the intention of creating a browser which protects users from malicious ad networks, basically. And they had wanted a token which they could use to reward people for their actions going across the web. And they tried to create a token on BTC, and due to basically fees and the network congestion, they ultimately transitioned over to their own token. I believe it's an ERC20 token. It's called BAT. And the way it works is as you're cruising around the web, you get paid in BAT to look at ads or do different other behavioral things. And so the next one is very important. It's called Quarters. So I was actually recently at a hackathon in Wyoming, and I met this 12-year-old boy who was very, very sharp. He's working with his father to create a platform called Pocket Full of Quarters. And the way this works, the inspiration behind this was, he's a 12-year-old boy, he plays tons of games. They thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could create a gaming platform? Developers could create games on our platform. People would come along and they would pay them in these in-app tokens called quarters, and then the developers would ultimately get paid in these quarters, which they could then use to redeem for their local currency. And so they actually are doing an ICO where they're raising money, and they have a securities token, and then they also have an in-app token that they're using called quarters. And so I thought that was one of the most clear-cut and clever uses of leveraging both a utility token and a security token. And the CEO of that company was a 12-year-old boy, which I thought was pretty amazing. Another one that I want to call out is the MakerDAO, MKR. So MakerDAO is a very interesting project that's happening in Ethereum, and they have what is called the DAI. So you can see there DAI, and this is a stable coin. So as far as I know, the very first stable coin is US dollar Tether, and that is based on, it was built with Omni, and Omni is what Wormhole is based on. And Tether was really one of the only tokens to escape from the Bitcoin ecosystem, Bitcoin Core, before that was all shut down. And I'm not here to argue the merits of Tether. I'm more drawing focus to this concept of a stable coin. So the way Tether works, as far as I understand, is there is an official company which says that they are holding in reserves in an actual bank account physical cash, which will make their Tether dollar map out to 1-to-1 with a US dollar. So it's like a stable coin that never goes too high or below a single dollar. And it's based on this one company holding reserves. Now, there have been concerns about that because, as far as I understand, they have not allowed their bank accounts to be audited. So there are different emerging ideas around how stablecoins can be done. There are 3 recently that have launched. So the Winklevoss twins, who I believe have the Gemini exchange, just recently launched a Gemini stablecoin. I know Circle recently made an announcement while I was in Tokyo a couple of days ago that they're launching a stablecoin. And then there's this thing called the DAI. So the way the DAI works is you can actually take an Ethereum token, you can wrap it in an ERC20 API, and then you can create a smart contract which allows you to do collateralized loans against your Ethereum. And that is basically, as I understand it, at the high level of how the DAI works. And the DAI, in this most recent crypto bleed out, I think the DAI never went below 90 cents, maybe 95 cents. So as far as I remember, it kept its valuation better than all of the other cryptocurrencies in this big recent loss. And so there's a huge debate going on right now in communities whether, how much stablecoins can scale, do they make sense, etc. I'm not having that debate. It's more that I'm calling attention to it as a very important phenomenon and something that I predict we will see emerging as the next missing piece in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. In the Bitcoin Cash token ecosystem. It's a stable coin. So that's utility tokens. Those are used within your company's product or service. And then there are security tokens. So real quick, I'll just read this. It says it derives its value from an external tradable asset. It's subject to federal securities regulations, and it's any ICO which passes the Howey test. So the Howey test is how the SEC decides if it's a security or not. And that is these 4 points. Is it an investment of money? There's an expectation of profit from the investment. The investment of money is in a common enterprise, and any profit comes from the efforts of a promoter or a third party. So for example, if I were to tokenize Bitbox and offer Box tokens, and then I told everybody, hey, you can send me money for Box tokens. Next year when Bitbox blows up and it's making a lot of profit, you guys will receive dividends based on how many Box tokens you hold. That would fall under that would be a security token because you're investing money and there's an expectation of profit based upon my actions and how well Bitbox does. And ICOs are huge. $28 billion was raised on ICOs over the past 4 years on Ethereum. So it's very clear that ICOs are important. I was at Trulia in 2012 whenever we had an IPO. I was on the mobile team. I didn't work on the team that did the IPO, but I remember it being about 13 months that they worked on that. They brought in an entirely team of very, very smart Silicon Valley lawyers who specialized in that. Our CEO did a nationwide roadshow where he went and talked to a bunch of institutional investors. We went public on the New York Stock Exchange. We worked with a big Wall Street bank like Goldman Sachs. It was very, very expensive and a very long legal red tape process. We raised $100 million. You can do that same thing today with an ICO, and you can do it 1,000 times faster with a lot less red tape. And so ICOs are very important. They're basically just how to raise money at the speed of the web. And it's something we want on Bitcoin Cash. It's something that we want to bring in businesses who want to leverage our platform. Like I said, $28 billion have been raised on Ethereum in the past 4 years. And that is liquidity which went through the Ethereum system. Those are people who had to ultimately hold Ethereum in order to partake in those crowd sales. Those are very smart companies which are now building on top of Ethereum. A lot of computer scientists, a lot of great creative energy. We want that happening on Bitcoin Cash. So just to sum up real quick, there are utility tokens and security tokens. Also, something else I want to call out real quick. I recently flew to Wyoming, where I went to a hackathon called the WYO Hackathon, hosted by Caitlin Long. And if anybody here doesn't know Caitlin Long, go Google her and check her out on Twitter. She is one of the most amazing women in the blockchain space, one of the most amazing people in the blockchain space. And so the backstory here is Wyoming is a very small state. It has 500,000 people total, but they have a lot of mineral resources, which they're pulling out of the ground. So they have a lot of money. Basically, the largest concentration of billionaires in the United States is in Wyoming. And Wyoming actually has a very interesting history. They had the very first woman voter and the very first woman governor, and they created the LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. So if you're in the United States and you're doing a startup, you will very often create an LLC in Delaware. But Wyoming was actually the state that created it. So Wyoming has a very interesting mix of people who live there, and basically they are able to move really quickly when they want to. And in this particular case, they moved very quickly over the last couple of years and recently passed some legislation which sets Wyoming at the forefront of the entire United States with regards to blockchain and cryptocurrency legislation. So last year they passed a law which makes utility tokens exempt from money transmitter laws. They passed a law which enables corporations to store their corporate records on blockchain. So you can imagine if you were a politician or a corporation and you wanted to literally store your corporate records to OC return, you are legally enabled to do that in Wyoming. And then they also passed a law creating an entirely new type of LLC, where you can have like a parent LLC and then a bunch of children LLC, and all of the children and the parent LLCs are all encapsulated from each other. So basically this just means in Wyoming, you can launch a utility token. It's exempt from money transmitter laws, and then you can create an LLC for every single individual purchaser of your token. And so they're passing more legislation this year. They just had a meeting this week with the FDIC where they are drafting a new type of bank. It's not going to be backed by the FDIC. It's going to be backed by the state of Wyoming, and it will allow you to deposit cryptocurrency as well as fiat, and it will be blockchain friendly, blockchain entrepreneur friendly. So the problem today is if you have a Wells Fargo or Bank of America account and you create a completely legitimate cryptocurrency business and start doing tens of millions of dollars in business, your bank account can get shut down because big banks are just unsure how to handle big cryptocurrency companies. So Caitlin Long and Tyler Linden, representative from Wyoming, and a bunch of other smart people there are putting legislation in place to attract blockchain entrepreneurs from all around the United States to put Wyoming at the forefront of cryptocurrency revolution. And I flew directly from Wyoming to South Korea, to Jeju Island, and something very similar is happening there as well. So South Korea has very strict cryptocurrency and ICO laws, but they have this little tiny island off the south coast called Jeju, and Jeju is a semi-autonomous zone, so very similar to Wyoming. There's some smart people there who can move real quick, and they are drafting laws to create what they're calling Crypto Valley, which is very similar to Wyoming. They're trying to invest a bunch of money and set up laws, legislation to set their little island at the forefront of the cryptocurrency revolution all across Asia. So the reason I mention that is because there are legal frameworks which are emerging, which are allowing us to understand more clearly about how our tokens break down. Are our tokens being used within our company's product or services, like the ones I've listed here? In that case, then we perhaps don't need as clear legal encapsulation around them. If they are being used to raise money, then we do. And fortunately now legal jurisdictions are springing up all around the world that are making this more clear. In the United States, we have the BIT license in New York, which is basically the opposite of what I'm talking about. It's all about putting on the brakes and slowing things down to protect the traditional banking industry. And then you can compare that with places like Wyoming and Singapore and Jeju Island that are trying to enable entrepreneurs and attract smart people and smart money to their ecosystem. So that is kind of where we were, where we are, and then real quick, I have a nice little video about where I think we are headed.
Okay. So let's have the video of the future that you've got. And now.
Yeah, real quick before, let me play this video. Let me see if you guys see this playing.
Yeah.
All right, so this is just about a minute and a half. This is not long. But I think this video, better than anything else, it perfectly encapsulates what I'm talking about when I say the Cambrian explosion. So here we can see the 4 years of ICOs, and we can see right here early on that Ethereum raised $19 million. This was the first crowd sale that I actually remember. It happened, they raised it in BTC, and then they used that to basically start creating the development of Ethereum. And so pretty early on, people realized that you could then create Ethereum tokens and use them to do crowd sales. And then basically you see the DAO show up right here, and they raised $168 million for the first distributed autonomous organization. And the DAO ultimately ended up getting hacked, but that was more due to the way the code was written, not so much in the idea of a DAO, because now we see the maker DAO. But then over the past maybe 18 months, you really start to see things pick up, and you just see this absolute explosion. You see EOS show up. EOS raised close to $4 billion ultimately in their crowd sale. And then this doesn't go quite through the end of this year, but you can just get a sense there of an absolute explosion in different types of projects. All of these people raising money or launching tokens on Ethereum with ERC20 tokens, none of this stuff happening in the Bitcoin core ecosystem when it could have. So I think this video basically sums up what I'm talking about when I talk about the Cambrian explosion. And I hope that we see something similar to this over the next 24 months in Bitcoin Cash. So thank you guys. I'm CG Cardona on Twitter and Telegram. You can reach out to me over my email address, gabriel@bitcoin.com. And then the project I work on is developer.bitcoin.com, which let me real quick show you. Can you guys see my browser? Did that jump over?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, awesome. So I created a project called Bitbox on January the 31st of this year. So it's been around 6 months or so, maybe a little bit over 6 months that I've been working on this, and it's been an absolute rocket ship ride to the moon. It took off relatively quickly. So basically I was into Bitcoin, years ago. I'm similar to you, Vikram. I saw the vision, I got it. The scaling debate was very frustrating to me because I am an engineer and I just like pragmatic solutions. And so it was clear to me that that was going nowhere. I shifted a lot of my focus to Ethereum and to other things. When Bitcoin Cash launched and I got my free coins due to the fork, it was immediately clear to me what Bitcoin Cash represented. It represented Bitcoin, the Bitcoin that we all know and love. And so I shifted my focus immediately back to Bitcoin Cash. I knew it was going to be huge. I created a framework called Bitbox, which is a JavaScript SDK for client-side and server-side Bitcoin Cash applications. It's fully featured. And basically, it's been downloaded all over the world and used in many of the popular apps today in our ecosystem. And that got the attention of Bitcoin.com, and they brought me onto their team around 3.5 or 4 months ago, and I've been now developing developer.bitcoin.com. And then while I've been at Bitcoin.com, I took a bunch of meetings with a bunch of different companies, and universally, they all wanted to know how they can launch ICOs on Bitcoin Cash, because it's just such an incredibly powerful paradigm shift. And, I was heartbroken to tell them for the first couple months that it wasn't possible because we had emerging token proposals, but nothing was really taking shape yet. So I was just really happy when I was in Hong Kong on August the 1st at the Bitmain event when they released Wormhole. I was in the same way that as soon as I saw Bitcoin Cash and I knew it was going to be huge, as soon as I saw Wormhole, I knew it was going to be absolutely huge. So I created this Wormhole SDK, which is for creating tokens and crowd sales on Bitcoin Cash. This is all live now. I've launched several tokens on mainnet and testnet. But we're also putting energy behind SLP at developer.bitcoin.com. We have one of the people who work on the SLP team who works with us, Spin BCH. And there are 3 different types of tokens. There are miner validated tokens, user validated tokens based on UTXO, and then user validated tokens that are not based on UTXO. And in my opinion, SLP is the front runner for UTXO based user validated tokens. So I think ultimately Wormhole and SLP will probably solve different problems, and I want to support them both with our energy. I myself have been focused on Wormhole because I think Ethereum is really amazing, and Wormhole will ultimately mature into what I think will look like Ethereum on top of Bitcoin Cash. And the reason Bitcoin Cash ultimately, in my opinion, the reason Bitcoin Cash is the best token platform out there is because EOS and Ethereum, both very, very powerful platforms, and they deserve credit, but neither of them are cash. So the reason we win is because we have cash and we have tokens. What they have is tokens. One of the things I really like to highlight is that tokens don't take away from Bitcoin Cash. Tokens are something we get on top of cash. So we remain the best money the world has ever known. That's still our #1 selling point that is very, very powerful. And then on top of that, we get this entirely other dimension of tokens. So, you know, the way Ethereum works is every single full node runs every single smart contract. So if you have a smart contract which blows up, like CryptoKitties did, then the entire network clogs down. And also, I want to give credit to the CryptoKitties team. I think CryptoKitties is pretty amazing. You hear a lot of people speak pejoratively about it, but I actually think it's pretty awesome. Those are the kind of computer science innovations we want. CryptoKitties really is just a non-fungible token. It's its own standard, ERC 721. And we're getting those on Wormhole. But I just wanted to give credit to them. But the way Wormhole works is not every single full node needs to execute every single op return. And so ultimately Wormhole or other op return based token protocols will scale much, much better on Bitcoin Cash than on Ethereum or EOS. So we have terabyte blocks on our roadmap. We want every single person on Earth, 10 billion people on Earth, to do 50 transactions every single day on chain. So we will ultimately have scale and throughput for token platforms in a way which Ethereum and EOS never will. So it's worth sort of mentioning that as well. And so I think that Wormhole will very much grow to look like Ethereum on top of Bitcoin Cash, and that we will ultimately, Bitcoin Cash is the best token platform out there because we have the cash layer, and because we're optimized for this idea of being cash for the world, we're going to end up having these huge blocks with huge throughput, and that will make our token platforms run much more smoothly and much more efficiently than any of the existing token platforms out there. So I work on Bitbox and Wormhole SDK. We have a Discord channel. I can share the link with you guys. We are there all the time. We have a very vibrant community. I'm the lead developer advocate at Bitcoin.com, so it's really my primary focus to on-ramp developers and users and community into the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. So we love to brainstorm with people. We love to on-ramp people. Please join our chat room. Please join our community. We want to do everything we can to make Bitcoin Cash the digital peer-to-peer electronic cash system of the entire planet. So thank you guys so much for having me. It's a great honor. I'll love to join you again anytime you want me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or address anything. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much, Gabriel. I think that's well said in the end. It's the real peer-to-peer cash system, like exactly how Satoshi wanted it, right? So to all the viewers right here, this was Gabriel, and Gabriel is a new team member of the Bitcoin.com and developing on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. So eventually we know by Ethereum that, you know, Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin blockchain, any of the blockchains can hold a lot of development on it, and then, you know, become eventually a model or a platform for everybody in the world to use as cash or asset, however that you want to. But then with so much of time that we've spent with Bitcoin, we just have to see how Bitcoin has developed so far. And there has been a little, you know, backdraws, you know, with Bitcoin core developers. They really, I've not seen any good, you know, visionaries there, and they don't have a foresee of really what they're going to bring into the world. Somebody who really understands a little bit of Satoshi's white paper can clearly tell that there's going to be an alternate system for the world. but the developers team of the Bitcoin themselves are not believing in that, and they're just pushing Bitcoin to be an asset class only, and then putting high fees for transfers. Eventually, that's going to take away the idea of how Bitcoin was going to be, a micropayments platform. That idea is just like killed by the developer team of the core, because they're not looking at how this is going to scale and why it should scale. I'm glad Bitcoin Cash spoke out, and that's one of the best things that's ever happened, like I was saying in the beginning. And with Bitcoin Cash, developed from somebody like Gabriel that we have with immense experience from Bitbox, and of course, I should talk about your personal experience also, Gabriel, like with your 3D printers and with your folk experiences. I think all of those really, gives you a lot of credibility and experience to bring in more tools and easy tools for Bitcoin Cash development, the blockchain development. I think that's where we will be able to eventually show, and you will be the front runner of that you can show the world and Bitcoin core developers that there's a lot more development that can go on the existing, Bitcoin Cash blockchain. That this can, because initially what we had issues was how a single currency is going to scale, and then with the limitations, and eventually by forking, that itself is a scaling process to me, because now it really kind of like with good intentions or not, but that's different. But now we have clear Bitcoin being an asset class and Bitcoin Cash coming out to be the real cash system for the whole world, because we really need to scale it. We don't want it just for a few elites to be using it. It's actually made for everybody in like Asia and India, and to be Africa, in those places where a small amount of value counts. So that's where Bitcoin Cash comes into play, where we know Bitcoin Cash can do eventually those things that Satoshi really visioned for Bitcoin, micropayments and things like that. Because it's a real killer if you have such a high fee for countries like India. How would Indians use Bitcoin? I know they would then go into an alternative, which we don't want, because it is got the potential to scale. It's just the way it is scaling is a little different. Now it's scaling with two different coins set up and two different blockchains, which is good enough. But as long as the development team is going to show the world this how if we're going to scale this cryptocurrency. So I guess everybody knows why Gabriel is here on the crypto space and our meetup, and also on the Bitcoin Cash development team. You guys had a question before, and I would like to take some more questions. Please shoot your questions. One of the questions I think we had in between was this guy saying about stablecoin, any kind of used cases. That was from Prajwal Singh. He's one of our developers at the instacrypto.in. The stablecoin, is there any use cases? Gabriel, I'd like to hear from you.
Sure. So remind me to get back to the stablecoin. I wanted to address something you said there because I thought it was spot on. So similar to how I believe there will be a Darwinian competition between the tokens and ultimately you will have a survival of the fittest, I also think that what you touched on a very important point. So it's really important that Bitcoin Cash was able to fork from Bitcoin Core, because now we get to play out in the marketplace this experiment about what actually makes more sense. Do we simply just scale the blocks, or do we try this Lightning Network kind of solution? And we get to see which one the market actually prefers and which one actually gets traction and takes off. And Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash share the same proof of work. So that's sort of like, that's the elephant in the room, if you will, because at any given time, there could be a flipping of that hash rates. And according to the Satoshi white paper, Bitcoin is the chain with the greatest proof of work. So I'm not sure that Bitcoin Cash will ever get the BTC ticker, but we have a very, very strong chance that we will end up with the hash rates. And so I think that in the simple terms of which one of the forks could ultimately mature to fulfill the destiny as it's sort of outlined in the Satoshi white paper, I think there's no question which one more clearly has the potential to do that. And then I wanted to really quickly touch on something else you had mentioned. Let me share my screen again. Let me know if you guys can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so recently we did a Bitcoin Cash stress test. So on September 1st, There was a community-driven effort to do a 5 million on-chain transactions over the course of 24 hours. And several of the tools were built with Bitbox and used some of rest.bitcoin.com. So I was involved pretty closely with that project. And I just wanted to highlight something to touch on what you had mentioned about Indians and how are Indians supposed to use it. So here you can see there's this website called fork.lol, which everybody here is probably familiar with, but I wanted to just highlight something. So here you can see the daily transactions between orange, which is BTC, and then blue, which is BCH. And normally on any given day, there is much, there's more organic traffic on BTC than there is BCH. But back around September the 1st, we were doing some stress tests, and over the course of a week, let me show you another webpage as well. Over the course of a week, we did about maybe 6 million transactions on chain on Bitcoin Cash. And we did the biggest the biggest block ever in all of blockchain history across all chains. We did 23.15 megabytes on-chain mainnet with 97,000 transactions. And you can see that happening right over here over the course of a couple of days. And a couple really interesting things happened here. So you can see we had these massive blocks, and just over the next block or two, they completely emptied out. So this kind of just shows that we really could have scaled the BTC blocks out to 2 megabytes, 4 megabytes. We probably could have done SegWit 2x and continued the adoption of BTC instead of forcing the fork and forcing so many entrepreneurs to basically move to Ethereum. And then so something else happened here, which this was the most important thing I learned during the whole stress test. So you can see here we did just this massive spike in on-chain transactions. But when we did that, you can see this is the fees of BTC versus BCH. And during the time we did this spike, the fees absolutely flatlined to 1 Satoshi. So you can see that normally there's a lot of variance in the BCH fees because we don't have a ton of on-chain transactions. And because there's variance in how much people's wallets pay, there's variance in what the fees are here. But whenever you absolutely spike out the transactions and have millions of them, most of which are paying 1 Satoshi per byte, you can see that the fees flatline. So I thought this was just very interesting visually to show that Bitcoin Cash scales and performs as you would expect it if it were to be cash for the world. So an experiment that was just never run on BTC was what happens if you accidentally, or if you actually just blow up the blocks. Well, we ran that experiment and we found out that what happens is the fees flatline to 1 Satoshi per byte. So we know now that if we scale out Bitcoin Cash to the planet, it's going to be cheap as possible for everybody on the planet to use. So I thought that was really informative, and I think this is one of the best bits of data that came out of the entire stress test, simply that we know that Bitcoin Cash performs at scale because we tested it. So
Yes, test, Gabriel, because I remember following this, and I saw that when I saw it, when I read about it, it said about 21 MB worth of space got used on that particular transaction, the highest ever, which you said was 23. That's really great. It's like 70% of the blockchain, your Bitcoin Cash blockchain was used at that time. Because if it says 32 MB is what the size it can hold, so we tested till the 23. That's really great, because if you compare the Bitcoin, it's like about 20x, yeah. And then that's the kind of transactions that we're expecting in the future, isn't it?
Really, that was, so I have seen a lot of people have speculated on a lot of stuff about what came out of that stress test. And so to give some sort of background there, Peter Risen and Andrew Stone from Bitcoin Unlimited, I just think those guys are absolutely wizards, and I want to give a shout out to them and all the great work they've done over the years. So previously this year, they did the Bitcoin Gigablock testnet, where they set up a testnet and they were trying to see what will it take for us to actually have gigabyte blocks today. And so they discovered that they were having bottlenecks around 23 megabytes. And so whenever we produced this 23 megabyte, I think they actually said 22 megabytes. So whenever we produced this 23 megabyte, a lot of people were surprised because they didn't think that a block could be produced that big. And so you see a lot of people on Reddit and stuff saying, the stress test was proof that we can't do, blocks bigger than 23 megabytes. But the truth is that was as fast as our bot could produce the transactions. that was as I perceive it, being on the ground producing those transactions, I think that was actually a limitation of our technology, not Bitcoin Cash. I suspect we could have gone bigger, but that was our first time ever doing that, and that was just as powerful as we could crank it up at that time. So actually, I think our team wasn't able to go to 32 megabytes, not Bitcoin Cash. So I've seen a lot of people sort of saying with authority, that proves Bitcoin Cash can only do 23. No, I think that was actually our bot wasn't able to crank it all the way up. So it's worth mentioning that. But to sort of circle back to that question about stable coins. So the way I have seen them used at the hackathons I've gone to is just if you're creating an application and a merchant is going to accept payments on your app, you have them accept payments in the DAI so that they're not exposed to the volatility of the price of the underlying token. So for example, Ethereum are the ones I saw. So if you're creating a marketplace and you could have them get paid in DAI, and then they can cash out the DAI whenever they get paid. So that's basically it, is just allowing some type of coin. And that's what I've seen now. I suspect we'll see other ones. And that's kind of the way Tether is used as well. But I think tokens, I think stable coins, the new emerging ones, will be more powerful than Tether, because Tether is tied to one company. And I think these new ones will be, collateralized loans on your own assets or something. There will just be different sort of models that are applied. But basically, that's the way I see it. Is just if you need to not be exposed to price volatility, but you still want to leverage all of the benefits you get with using these crypto tokens, then you need a stable coin.
I guess the price volatility has been hyped up too much because it really doesn't have any issues. Like when you use Bitcoin Cash over the period of time for a transaction or value transfer or settlements, you move value within a second. It's already a Lightning network. There has never ever been a chance or ever been shown that a transaction can be reversed. It's only theoretical, never been done. So there is like clear Lightning network with Bitcoin Cash. It shows, and Bitcoin Cash is proving it time and again to everybody that on-chain instant transactions are always instant. So where are you losing value? You're not losing any value. The fluctuation does not come into the play. And actually the fluctuation helps in a lot of trading, right? So only because it fluctuates so high, a lot of people love to trade these currencies. Also, there is one question I'd like to ask you, Gabriel. This Hyper app, have you heard of that? HIVR?
FIVER, Fiber?
No, the Fiber is of course, I understand. This is the Hyper, HIVR, Hyper app, made for exclusively Bitcoin Cash. I just heard about it like a couple of days ago that the developer is trying to build this an app for just exclusively to use Bitcoin Cash on it to incentivize people and then to tip and to move value around on the app.
No, I don't think I've heard of that. I think it's worth mentioning, you had mentioned the Lightning Network. So ultimately, we will get some type of fix to transaction malleability on Bitcoin Cash. It doesn't have to be segregated witness. There are other proposals out there. And when we get a fix to transaction malleability, we will also have the Lightning Network on Bitcoin Cash, and it will perform better on Bitcoin Cash. So basically, the Lightning Network just needs on-chain transactions to open and close these payment channels. And of course, because Bitcoin Cash has the throughput and the inexpensive fees, and you're guaranteed to get in the next block or two, Lightning Network will end up performing much better on Bitcoin Cash anyway than it does on Bitcoin Core. So I think that's also worth mentioning that eventually we will have something like the Lightning Network, and it will be more performant than what exists on Bitcoin Core as well.
Sure. You're right. So we did have a couple of questions. I was going to read them. I couldn't finish that reading of the question. Let me just see that.
I think you might have froze, or I might have froze. Did you guys lose me?
Yeah, I can listen to you very clearly. And I think I have the question here. I can call it out for you. It says, when can we see bull run of Bitcoin Cash?
I don't comment on the markets. I'm not a trader. Believe it or not, I don't even look at the price. I swear I don't. I get paid in Bitcoin Cash. I cash out what I need. I hold the rest. To me, the technology is the most important thing. So the analogy I use is the dot-com boom. The web changed everything. It's clear that the world is different now than it was whenever the web was created. And during, 98 to 2000, a lot of smart people knew the web was going to change everything. A lot of money rushed into the ecosystem. The web was not quite mature. The bubble popped. A lot of money rushed out. But you're freezing. Let me know if you guys can still hear me. Everybody good?
Yes. Sounds great, Gabriel.
Okay, cool. So the, the bubble popped. All the money rushed out. But the web still matured and went on to change everything. And that's how I feel that we are right now with the Bitcoin world, or the cryptocurrency world. So I think, over the last year, a lot of smart people knew that crypto was going to change everything. A lot of money rushed in. There was a huge bubble last year. The cryptocurrency technology was not quite mature enough for mainstream adoption. The bubble popped. A lot of money rushed out. But the technology is legit, and it's going to continue to mature and ultimately change the world in the way that we suspect it is. And so, if anything, down markets like this are great opportunities to accumulate, your cryptocurrency holdings. But because I work so closely with it on the ground, I know that the technology is is maturing very quickly, and I suspect that big things will happen over the next year, but I don't really day trade and I don't speculate on the price. I would say just keep your eyes on the technology, and as the technology matures, the valuation will come in line with that.
Thanks a lot, Gabriel. I think exactly like this. I have spoken when we opened the first ever Bitcoin exchange in India, it's UnoCoin. When UnoCoin opened, CoinDesk had this interview with me, and the thing that I had at the time to say was about how CoinDesk, how Bitcoin technology was going to be like the important thing, and how we're going to work on the technology part in India as much, because a lot of people that I met at the time in the meetups, they were like very excited about the technology side of the Bitcoin also.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that was clear.
Yeah, you got it. I heard you for sure.
Okay. So yeah, there was another question about what was the point? What was the thing I would say? Yeah, about Bitbox. Will Bitbox be based only on JavaScript? Is a question from Robin.
Sure. So currently, I am a web developer. So it's built with Node.js and JavaScript. I have pulled out all of the APIs, so we have all of the different classes and the method names, and then the arguments, data types, return values. We've got everything clearly lined in a wiki, and it's been on my roadmap for a long time to have an iOS or a Swift implementation, and then as well as like a Java implementation. And I mean, if it were up to me and I had an endless team of engineers, I would have a Python implementation. I would also have a Go and a Rust implementation. I think all of those platforms are extremely important, and I think there's really smart people working on all of those tools. So sure, I think ultimately I do want to port Bitbox to a bunch of other platforms and languages. They're not my specialty at the moment and not something I've been able to focus on. So if you are an open source developer in any of those tribes and you want to plug in and start working on that, that would probably be the most value add. Like I said, we have a Discord channel you can plug into, and I can help on-ramp you to that. And then ultimately, as I'm building out my team at Bitcoin.com, I hope to bring on iOS developers and Android developers and developers in these different frameworks and port Bitbox to those languages. So yeah, ultimately Bitbox will not just be JavaScript. It is at first just because that's my core language, and I built it all myself.
Sure, thank you. So we have another question about Bitcoin Cash node experiment that you had tested before. Would you like to say a few things about that, Gabriel?
Which one was it?
The BCH, Bitcoin Cash node experiment that you had talked about a long time ago.
Bitcoin Cash node experiment. Can you refresh my memory? I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's switch the question. Actually, we can take a question that is being given by one of our followers. Okay, that was from Gabriel, of course. So what I heard from your BCH node experiment, actually, so typically the nodes that we have for Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, can they be like you run on Bitcoin Cash node, and you can quickly now switch over to Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash? Is that how it can be worked?
So you're saying if you run a full node, can you switch between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core? Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, you would need to run two different nodes because you're going to ultimately have to have two different blockchains. I don't really run a Bitcoin Core full node, so I'm not exactly even sure. But I know that, for example, Bitcoin Unlimited has a cash version and a core version. And I know when you build them, you can basically choose which one you're going to want to build. So, I am personally, I'm personally only involved in Bitcoin Cash. To me, that's the most exciting technology, and that's where I'm choosing to put my focus. So I'm not involved in Bitcoin Core at all. So I'm not even really sure what's involved with running a Bitcoin Core full node. But as far as I understand, you would definitely need to keep both blockchains. So, each one's going to be a little bit less than 200 gigs. And then between switching back and forth on them, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's two full different nodes. So I feel like there would be a little bit of complexity there.
No, it's definitely. I think there was one of these gentlemen that I used to follow. His name is Chris Ellis from the UK, and he used to develop a lot of work on Bitcoin. And then he actually developed this one small computer gadget that looks like a Raspberry Pi. What it can do is it can actually download the whole. It's a node. You can fit it as a node, and then you can even download the whole ledger if you want to. And it even gives you a notification if there was going to be any change on the node or any change on the core protocol of the Bitcoin core. Is there anything similar that we have for Bitcoin Cash also probably in future?
Yeah, I think as Bitcoin Cash scales out, it's not going to ultimately be something that we run on like Raspberry Pis or smaller nodes, because I think it's going to ultimately be specialized to data centers. And that's something which I don't think is bad. So, I think there was maybe a bit of an over infatuation with not allowing, I think the religion got too closely coupled to this centralization argument. So I think if we're going to scale out to be the cash of the planet, most people will probably access Bitcoin Cash over SPV, and then there will just be specialized data centers which run Bitcoin at scale. So I'm not really sure the answer to that. I don't know if we'll see a bunch of people running it on their own home Raspberry Pis. I'm not really sure the answer to that. I know we're setting up cloud services where we're going to allow businesses to run their own full nodes and to make it easy as blockchain as a service. And I suspect there will be a class of users who do that, who are open source contributors like myself. I run multiple full nodes, and even as they get more expensive. But I'm not sure if we'll ultimately see a bunch of home users running full nodes. I don't know.
Oh, for sure. I think the more we develop eventually on Bitcoin Cash, and I guess the community of Bitcoin Cash, once it develops, it's already developed. It's not like we have not developed, because the Bitcoin Core developers and team from Bitcoin from 2009 itself understand that Bitcoin Cash is also the same. And there is a big following team, of course. And I think there'll be, like we were talking about before, probably Bitcoin Cash might hold a bigger market share in years to come. We never know, because the development and understanding will soon be there with the people. And I guess these kind of small nodes and technology will always be built around what's best. Eventually, I'm thinking is Bitcoin Cash today. So yeah, let's keep it to Bitcoin Cash for now. And if there's any last question, anybody shoot. We'd like, Gabriel's been here since a hour and a half, and it's very early there.
Good, I don't mind.
Words to you, Gabriel.
Yeah, I don't mind. Thank you so much for having me. And I think, I think a lot of the innovation will move off of just working around the protocol stuff as well. And that's kind of what I'm trying to enable with the tooling I'm building at Bitcoin.com. So I think one of the most important things we can do is start on-ramping application developers. We want to see people building on top of Bitcoin Cash, both money layer and token layer. And so I believe as more and more people come into the ecosystem and start building their visions on Bitcoin Cash, the innovation won't just be happening around the protocol. I feel like there will just be such an ecosystem of exciting things happening around it at the application layer. I think the application layer is where it's going to catch fire and take over the world, because that's where it interacts the most with all the individual people.
You're right. You're right. Well, that was a great topic and a great meeting today, Gabriel. Thank you very much for being with us, and this has been an amazing experience, and it opened up a lot of answers to me to understand a little bit more, and getting more deep into Bitcoin Cash. And in a few days' time, probably we will see more and more development coming up, and we'll try and catch up another time very soon and see how the developments happen so far.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Again, I'll gladly join you guys anytime. We have a Discord channel. I will make sure to get the link to you guys, and feel free to join us, and let's continue the conversation there if anybody wants to move forward.
Sure. Thank you very much, Gabriel. And thank you, Chris. You've done a great job supporting you from the back end. And thanks a lot to Gabriel, too.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Have a nice day, Gabriel.
All right. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Thank you. All right. So let me get you the link here if anybody